Hello, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I'm Elma Karen, your Assistant City Attorney, and I'd like to present to you an urgency ordinance that amends Chapter 22, Article 8 of the Oxnard City Code regarding water waste. As outlined in the staff report, the City Attorney's Office recommends that the City Council introduce for first reading by title only and adopt an urgency ordinance pursuant to Government Code Section 36937B, amending certain sections of Article 8 of Chapter 22 of the Oxnard City Code and implementing water conservation measures. And the ordinance is entitled An Urgency Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oxnard, amending Chapter 22, Article 8 of the Oxnard City Code to comply with and enforce emergency drought-related water use restrictions. California is experiencing a drought emergency following the 3 driest years on record. On March 18th, 2022, the Department of Water Resources announced that the state water project allocations would be 5%, reduced down from 15% in the previous year. Following this announcement, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California indicated that state water project dependent regions within its service area have insufficient supplies to meet current water demands. The Calleguas Municipal Water District receives most of its water from Metropolitan Water District via the State Water Project, receiving about 80% of its water from outside sources. The city of Oxnard receives up to 40% of its water from Calleguas. On March 28, 2022, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-7-22 in response to the historic drought conditions. The order requires all water providers to implement a minimum Stage 2 of their water shortage contingency plans. On April 27, 2022, Calleguas declared a Stage 3 water shortage and called on all water users within its service area to immediately reduce water use by up to 30%. On April 26, 2022, the Metropolitan Water District adopted a framework for an emergency water conservation program to reduce non-essential water use and preserve available supply for the greatest public benefit in state water project dependent areas. The framework includes 2 pathways for affected Met member agencies to reduce the use of their state water project supplies. First is to reduce outdoor watering to 1 day per week or meet a monthly allocation limit. Thereafter, Calleguas adopted an emergency water conservation program, including the 2-path compliance framework consistent with that of METS. On May 17, 2022, the City Council proclaimed in Resolution number 15569 the existence of a local emergency due to water shortage conditions and adopted new mandatory water conservation measures consistent with Stage 2 of the city's water shortage contingency plan. 1 week later, the State Water Resource Control Board adopted an emergency regulation implementing a statewide ban on the use of potable water for irrigating non-functional turf at commercial, industrial, and institutional properties, including homeowners associations. The State Water Resource Control Board has defined non-functional turf as turf that is solely ornamental and not regularly used for human recreation purposes or for civic or community events. The Water Control Board regulation will remain in effect for 1 year unless it modifies, readopts, or lifts the regulation before then. In response, the city issued Director Order number 20-3 on June 23rd of 2022, establishing a 10-minute per day per station irrigation limit, with the exception of the hand watering of food plants outside of the designated watering period with the use of a container or hose with a shutoff nozzle. The director's order also banned the use of potable water for irrigation of non-functional turf at commercial, industrial, and institutional properties, including homeowner associations, which is in line with the State Water Resource Control Board's emergency regulation. Efficient enforcement of water conservation measures requires amending certain sections of Article 8 of Chapter 22 of the Oxnard City Code. And the urgency ordinance provides for new water conservation measures and enforcement procedures, thereby keeping the city in compliance with state and local mandates and helping to reduce water use. And this urgency ordinance is submitted pursuant to Government Code Section 36937B, which authorizes the adoption of an urgency ordinance for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, or safety. An urgency ordinance allows the City Council to immediately adopt and implement a new law for the preservation of public health and safety. The urgency ordinance, if adopted by the City Council, will go into effect immediately. And the urgency ordinance provides the city with the immediate ability to comply with and enforce water waste prohibitions and water conservation measures required during the declared drought emergency. The urgency ordinance updates the city's water waste code by implementing emergency water conservation measures that only apply when the City Council or the Director of Emergency Services declares a drought emergency. The urgency ordinance updates the enforcement mechanism for water waste violators by issuing administrative citations for violations and emergency water conservation measures. The urgency ordinance implements restrictions on the watering of non-functional turf and limiting outdoor irrigation to a certain number of days per week. The urgency ordinance will allow for the hand watering of trees, food plants, or other perennials with a container such as a bucket or watering can or a hose fitted with a shut-off nozzle. The use of drip irrigation or other high-efficiency irrigation systems are allowed. And sports activity fields may be irrigated more frequently, but only as necessary to maintain the playing surface quality. And again, that's dependent upon the drought stage as declared by the City Council or Director of Emergency Services. The urgency ordinance also updates the water waste code to be in conformity with Oxnard's water shortage contingency plan. The water shortage contingency plan created 6 stages of drought and corresponding water conservation measures for the city to apply depending on the drought stage the city is facing. Currently, the city is in a stage 2 drought. This urgency ordinance amends certain sections in Article 8 of Chapter 22 of the Oxnard City Code. First, it creates a new section 22-137 entitled Water Waste Prohibited Emergency Provisions. This section addresses the day-to-day water waste prohibitions that correspond to a particular drought stage. Next, sections 22-138 and 139 replace the prior enforcement scheme and create an administrative violation process. The first 2 violation notices are informational. And then the administrative fine scheme, as set forth in section 22-138, is for repeat and egregious offenders. The fine amounts are as follows: $100 for a 3rd violation, $300 for a 4th violation, and $700 for a 5th violation. Additional violations could be subject to the installation of flow restricting devices. The city is currently responding to water waste violations with an informational approach and has gained compliance with this method. The water waste prohibitions shall only be in effect when the City Council or Director of Emergency Services proclaim a drought emergency. If and when the proclamation of a drought emergency ceases or is rescinded by City Council, these prohibitions, while still available in the Oxnard City Code, will not be in effect or enforced. Conversely, The permanent water waste provisions in Section 22-136 shall apply at all times and will be enforced under the same administrative process and fine schedule as the emergency water waste provisions. Staff will continue to implement a vigorous public information campaign to notify city water customers of the increased level of water conservation requirements, with a focus on gaining willful compliance. The city will increase the level of monitoring, notification, and enforcement as necessary and may assess fines and penalties for violations of the urgency ordinance. Staff will be seeking funding from Metropolitan Water District to aid in the enforcement activities such as water patrols. The financial impact of adopting this ordinance is unknown. City staff, particularly code compliance officers and water utility staff, will spend additional time investigating water waste violations, issuing water citations, and participating in the review hearing process. These activities will occur in the normal course of duty, but may result in increased expenditures associated with water conservation compliance efforts. That concludes staff's presentation, and myself or staff are available for questions. Thank you.